All right. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks for joining, Yusuf. How are you?
Thank you, sir. I'm well. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. So, Yusuf, I think we met at a Cisco training event, right, in Cisco Toronto office. I think back in 2017. This is the first time we
Some,
met, right?
somewhere around there. Yes,
Yeah.
it was a partner event for from Cisco at the downtown at HQ,
Right.
and you
Right.
were
And you
presenting, and
were
I was the audience
you were with NTT back then, right?
at the time. Correct.
Okay. That's good. And I think back then you were part of the professional services team, right? And I was trying to basically push you to make that transition. And I think I made several attempts to get you at Cisco as well at some point, but this was not, I guess, you know, successful attempt from my side either. So tell us about your journey. Like, you have made this journey from being a techie into a sales engineering role or business focused role. So tell us about your journey, your transition. How did you make that journey? Because a lot of people I speak to, especially the engineers, they always have this fear of unknown, jumping into the dark side. So how was your experience?
Sure. Well, I'm a bit of a sales guy or sales engineer, so I'm into storytelling, and that's just personally how I roll as well. So I'll give you the story or my journey of becoming a sales engineer. Kind of really started right from when I was in undergrad school in one of the prestigious engineering universities back in Pakistan, where I hail from, and it was some of the brightest, the creme de la creme of the city used to go there, or the country used to go there. So very sharp minds around me, the kind of minds that were hired before they graduated from the undergrad school. They were hired by companies like Microsoft and Meta, right? So I'm sitting among them, nowhere near where they were, but we were all there in the same class, and when every time there was an ask to present something by an English teacher or from any other subjects as well, you'd see them hiding behind their seats, and I'd be the one to say, "No, I'm going to go up there and talk." Right. So I would say that I was not everything has to do with having a personal inclination towards a role, but it is an important and vital part as well. So I was kind of positioned well. So from there, from an engineering university, I wanted to pursue a business or sales type of career because personality wise, I thought that was a good match for me. But for whatever reason, I just got into networking, CCNA, worked as a knock engineer. And as part of that initial role, working with the customers, one thing that positioned me again well for the eventual role that I'm in right now is being customer facing. So I was always customer facing in different technical roles, though. They weren't sales roles, but they were customer facing, right? So I would get feedback and commentary from colleagues, management, and sometimes even my customers that I'm a sales or business guy, and I should move towards that. And there was some internal misgivings, concerns, you know, fear would be a word that you use, right, as well, to some extent, that we can talk about more in detail, is what kept me from making the move, to the point that I would even get inquiries from recruiters about a sales engineer and stuff because of the technical certifications that I'd acquired at some point in my career. And I would still not go towards that, right? I would resist the urge, temptation, and we can talk about the reasons until I eventually made the move, right? So I
Yeah.
tried many different roles, being a deployment engineer to being a support engineer to being even an architect, and eventually landed where I thought was my calling.
You know what? When I met you first time, and right, from our early part of the discussion, I immediately recognized, you are someone who can easily transition into an SE role. And since then, I've been pushing you, if you remember, to take that transition, right? So I think one of the things that holding people back is I don't have the sales experience. I don't know if I can sell. I don't know if I have the sales, talent, or I don't know if I can face the executives. So did you have
Mhm.
this fear as well before you take the transition, or you thought maybe? I can do it. Maybe I should try and just jump into the fire.
So that's a great question, and honestly, when it comes to fear or concerns or misgivings, it could be a number of things, and everybody's different, right? So while I did have my concerns, they were not quite what you mentioned. I did have concerns though, which is why I resisted the move for as long as I did. My fears were more of a different nature, and I'll spell them out for you here and for our audience. And they were more around, I had this misgiving, and there might be some truth to it as well, that, if I'm hardcore, technical, hands-on, that somehow I will have more job security, more job stability. I will be financially more rewarded and things like that. Even though my inner feeling was that I need to be where I am, be happier, what I enjoy more, which is a customer facing role in a sales environment. I resist that because of those fears. The other fear was, if I will let go of a hands on type of role that I was doing thus far in my career, that I will lose the technical sharpness and that edge, and somehow, more importantly, it will put me at a disadvantage. Well, if you don't do anything on a regular basis, like hands-on, obviously you can't keep up and you will not be as sharp, but it does not necessarily put you at a disadvantage, right? So that's where I was wrong. So from my personal history perspective, that those were the concerns which were holding me back for the longest time.
I think people always compare the role from a different lens, because if you're working as a technical engineer or a solution architect, your job is to be an expert on designing and architecting the solution. That of course require you have to be up to date, all the time with the technology and design that's coming out. But when you are an SE, you are not laser focused on a technology, but you are basically looking at at a business problem that you're trying to solve, and that may require multiple technologies, right? And then you cannot be expert
Correct.
on all the technologies that you're working on, so you have to understand enough to kind of map those technological solutions into the uh, business problem that the customer has, right? I think this is where I think the people always try to kind of look at these two roles from a different lens, and this is where the disconnect happens. So once
Absolutely.
you take over this whole journey, uh, what was your perspective of looking at the business? Because from my experience, my perspective in terms of how I look at the business and the different different ideas completely change. Because before I was laser focused, I was only looking at a technical problem. Now the horizon is much bigger, and that does two things for me. Number one, it opens a lot of doors for opportunities, and then it also gave me an exposure into the elevated level of people that I meet on regular basis now, like executives, directors, where in previous role when I was an engineer, I had no interaction, no line of sight with that kind of group of people. How was your experience?
So you brought up several pertinent points. I would say that I'll go to one step forward and say that it's not just about that you're not an expert on every piece of technology that you'll deal with. I would say you're not even expected to be an expert on those technologies, right? That is not the core requirement of your role. The core requirement of your role is to facilitate a customer's journey from their discovery and requirements to a final business outcome. You gotta find the technical resources on your end or and from anywhere, and kind of marry them with the business requirements of the customer, right? So your job is of that a facilitator, not necessarily of a technical expert. That is not to say that technical competence is not required for the role. It absolutely is. So to have that right pertinent background is very useful. um, Now moving on to your second part of your question of where it takes you. Networking is, I would say, it's part requirement of the role and part advantage of the role, depending on which lens you look at it from, right? So you're absolutely right, right? When I was a network engineer, when I was a deployment engineer, the customer personas that I would get to meet with on a daily basis, or for the most part, were the engineers on their end, the technicians on their end, the max would be ID manager, and that's about it. once in a while I would do a training, and then I would get to see some senior management and get to interact with them, which is where, by the way, I got a little bit more confidence that I can actually do this stuff, right? Like I managed to do fine. It's called exposure therapy, right? So by way of my technical roles, and the projects that I worked on in the channel side, I got exposed to dealing with some of the business audience, and I realized, wait a second, I'm doing just fine, and maybe I should do more of it. I'm enjoying it, right? So yes, you're absolutely right. Coming back to your point, the networking aspect is great, because it's not like, as a sales engineer or a solutions engineer, whatever you want to call it, different organizations, by the way, called this the same type of role, different things. It's not like you're sitting in front of your desk doing, certainly not configurations day in day out, although you might have to sometimes, but it also requires a component of meeting customers, whether remote, in person, going out to conferences, which is where I run into you all the time for industry events, as you know. And that is where you get to see many different personas from the customer side, and it could be very advantageous in terms of getting better exposure, getting more experience, opening the doors for you in the future, whether on the business side or the personal side, right? So I would say these are both the perks and the requirements of the job.
Yeah. I remember, the peer feedback is also very important, and sometimes it gives you a boost, sometimes it does opposite. In my case, when I was part of the professional services team, I used to travel to customer sites, and I used to sit down with architects and basically the network leaders on the other side of the organization, and
Hmm.
oftentimes they used to give me the feedback, and oftentimes it was positive, and then whenever I was trying to explain technology in a way that I naturally do, they said, you should be in pre-sales, or you should be in a sales engineering role. That peer feedback was very important to kind of give me the boost and confidence to kind of think about it. Okay, maybe I should think beyond my current role and look ahead what's coming, and maybe transition into that role. So that was my journey
Excellent.
as well. So now you have been doing this SE role for how many years? 2 years? 3 years?
No, no, much longer than that. So this is my third organization where I'm in a pre-sales sort of a role. So I would say now it's coming up to good 6 years, give or take, because part of the transition that I can't go into every single job I was at. You talked about my journey. My journey from post-sales to pre-sales happened while I was with an organization. So that's an interesting story on its own of how I made the switch, how I transitioned within an organization from between teams to come into this kind of role. You don't necessarily have to quit and leave your organization and your current job to be able to go into that role. So yeah, if all things factored, about 6 years plus, give or take.
Okay. And you work with the partners and also now with vendors, right? Did you see any difference in terms of the road itself when you were with a partner versus now with a vendor?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I love to talk about it with my industry peers and friends. Well, let's take a step back and take a lens at, different organizations again call the role of a technical plus salesperson, an engineer, if you will, differently. Some would call it a sales engineer, others would call it pre-sales engineer, some would call it solutions engineer. This is for the benefit of our audience who are not into this landscape. I'm sure you're well aware of all of these terms. Some would call it even sales architect, solution architect. More or less, they are similar roles, which is where you speak technology, speak business, and you're customer facing, and your end goal is to solve customer requirements and business problems and give them the right solutions and outcomes, right? So this is what the role entails.
Yeah. And I think I have been in my early part of the career, I was with some of the operators before. And then I noticed that when you work with operator, your exposure to that level of business is different but when you come work with a vendor, then of course it gives you a different perspective completely, because as a vendor you are actually selling your product to the business owners, right? Not
Actually, it's a
really
very good
the
point.
end user.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I realize I didn't highlight the difference in or answer your question and did justice to it. So let me come back to it really quickly. I have actually been in different roles, but if you just talk about sales engineering role, both with a partner or system integrator versus a vendor, which is where I'm currently am at as well. There certainly is a bit of a difference of how both these organizations treat this role. So at a high level, I would say on a partner side, you're a little bit more, because this role is a combination of sales slash business skills plus technical skills, right? The proportion can vary, and this is how it varies in the channel plus versus partner versus vendor landscape. On the partner side or system integrator side, you are a little bit more business focused than technology focused, because you can always rely on a um, vendor whose technology you're kind of reselling to get that competence and knowledge and expertise from. You can rely, in most cases you do, versus on the flip side, on the vendor side, the role is a little bit more focused on the technology and the technical side than the sales side, because the buck, so to speak, stops with you, right? As a partner sales engineer, you can always go to a vendor and say, hey, this is your technology, can you help demystify this issue? Versus on the vendor side, you are the last stop, so to speak.
Last resort. Yeah.
So last resort. So you have to, that now that does not mean you have to personally know, you, as you spoke about it in your previous sessions as well, you have an army of people, you have a entire support ecosystem around you to dab into and get the right answer or the solution and then provide it, but you are that point person. So this is how the role differs as well. Financially, it could be the same or might be different. Another challenge you will run on the partner side is that you, in most cases, you may not be reselling a single technology or single vendor's technology. You deal with a whole breadth of products and services and vendors. So it's harder as well for you to stay on top of everything, which is why you kind of rely on the vendors as well. Versus on the vendor side, you are more like dealing with a specialized set of products and services that your organization sells. So
Yeah.
these are the nuances between partner versus vendor to answer your question.
Yeah, I think which is good and bad, because when you work for a partner, uh, you are being an expert on a little bit of everything that your partner or your system integrator is selling. That gives you a breadth of portfolio to manage, and then of course it will help you to improve your skill set and experience. But while working with a vendor, you're laser focused on the vendor technology. I mean, both have pros and cons, but I think both will give you ample opportunities to pursue as you build up your expertise around that ecosystem. So,
Absolutely.
what do you see as, like, if the young engineers are watching this podcast and they're expecting you to give them some, healthy tips to kind of uh, for them to work on, improve themselves, and then make that transition, what would you say?
That's a very good question, and I'll just mention that for the benefit of some of the viewers, and you might know that on my personal side, the way I give back to the communities, I volunteer with a couple of organizations where I mentor young professionals or new immigrants who are looking to just get into the technical field, not just the sales engineer role, right? So this is the conversation I have on a very regular basis. So this question is very near dear to me. To come to the question, look, this role is a combination of skill sets, and I will lay it out for you. There at a high level, it stands on three pillars: technical skills, communication skills, and soft skills. It's like one third of each of these components that make up a sales engineering or solutions engineering role. Um, you can literally, anything is possible, right? So you may be naturally inclined towards one versus the other. These are at the end of the day skill sets that can be learned with a bit of a practice, a bit of a focus. And if you are a young person starting on the sales side or on the technical side, you're just dealing with one aspect of these three roles, just be mindful of the other aspects of this future role that you're targeting yourself. Your current job persona or requirements may not require you, for instance, to network within the team or to find ways to effectively communicate or articulate a very complex problem to your customers. And you might just be a knock engineer. As an example, you open up tickets, you close tickets, you resolve tickets, and that's your day to day. But if you go above and beyond, firstly, it will be good for you in the current role, but it will position you well for the future role as well. And you know, Technical skills, I would say, are the easiest part. Diamond dozen out there, resources are plenty. You can get a course and be up to speed on technology. I would say people fear it the most. That's probably the easiest part. The tricky part are the communication and soft skills, because there isn't a course that can give you A to Z. There are courses such as the one you have come up with that can help you be on the transition. So I'll do a quick plug for your amazing course that you've developed for those engineers. But as a young guy who's like looking at a long term, hey, this is where I want to end. Work on those communication skills. Exposure therapy in general, as they say, is very useful, right? Put yourself in the position, volunteer to present, volunteer to speak to the customer, volunteer to go out to the events, network with people, and these are the skills which over time, they take time. Over time you'll develop and you'll be in the position where you will feel confident to say, yes, I'm ready for this, I'll make the switch.
Yeah, that's why I call it a journey. It's a transformation. It's not like an overnight change that you can just
Change,
make.
yeah.
And to your point, thanks for plugging my shameful advertisement on the course. But that course is only giving you the foundation, right? It doesn't give you everything that is required, but it gives you the foundation where you can build upon that. And and one thing I want to add into your list as well, look for some shadow projects. There might be projects in your organization which you're not part of it officially, but you can volunteer yourself to be part of that, and then do some volunteer work. Maybe it will give you exposure to present this to an external audience. Because one thing I also notice, you always are comfortable in talking to your internal people, and then you can stand up against your internal audience because that's friendly. But when it
Yeah,
comes to facing an external audience, that's a completely different vibe. And then that will give you enough confidence to build up over time and then be able to present a much larger external audience going forward. So I
absolutely.
think, yeah, I think those tips are very good. And as you said, it's a journey. It's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. But once you start building up all these soft skills, especially the speaking skill, this will definitely help you over time. Let's say if you continue doing that over the next 6 to 12 months, you will be a different person altogether, and then you'll be ready to basically jump into that challenge going forward. So I think this was a wonderful conversation, Yusuf. Thanks for showing up here. Any last
My
comment
pleasure.
before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I want to extend your point, since we have 5 minutes. The examples for the points that you mentioned, and they're very important. Um, Challenge and opportunity, right? So take it. So depending on the organization that you're currently with, keep your ears close to the ground, as they say, right? Look for those things. Again, they're not part of your day to day, but there will be programs and opportunities. I'll give you two examples from my career. From my first job as a NOC engineer with one of the telcos, there was a apprenticeship challenge program that they started, where you could voluntarily sign up for it and become a team, and as a team pick up a current pain point within your organization and give it a solution that then will be judged by a panel. So it was a competition. And if your solution wins, if you are to articulate your solution and its value, the solution will be when you'll be awarded, and the company will then implement it. So I took part in such an initiative in my first job, and that's where I got a real experience of what it is like to deal with a business problem, right? So that was great free training that I got rewarded for. Another example is, fast forward a few jobs later within the organization, they announced a mentorship program, right? So again, it was voluntary. You could sign up to be a mentee, and get mentored by different personas. So at the time, I thought I was ready to make the transition. So my mentor was the head of solution engineering at the organization, and that's exactly when I made the switch from post sales to pre sales. So again, these little things, keep your eyes open, take those opportunities, and they will reap benefits. And wrapping up, again, like you said, these are all tips. These things don't happen overnight. There are some resources such as your courses and other things, I would say, to continue to work on them. Nothing happens overnight. Confidence takes times to develop. Experience is not a one-time event or one-night thing. It takes time. Be patient, but be consistent and persistent, and you will get where you want to be. And yeah, that's just my final thoughts.
Absolutely. And I will double down on the coaching piece that you just mentioned, because I think all of us needs coaching, regardless, where you stand in your overall journey. I also need coaching from
So
my
true.
senior as well, right? So always reach out to the people who you think should guide you or give you a lot of coaching tips in your organization or even outside organization as well, because like social media and internet is making things much easier now to connect with people. If you look at a leader as your mentor, reach out to them on LinkedIn. Give them a quick message. Maybe they're busy, they won't respond immediately, but at some point maybe they will come back to you and ask for like a 15 minutes coffee chat, or 30 minutes conversation on the phone, just to get some coaching highlights from them. And this will definitely help you to kind of give you a perspective of others, who how they think the organization and the business compared to what you think. And this will give you definitely an edge in terms of how you want to plan your roadmap going forward. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Yusuf. I think this was a wonderful conversation, and hopefully I'll get you back on the LinkedIn Live again sometime later. But thanks a lot, and have a good day to you.
Thank you for having me. I truly enjoy the conversation, Yasin. Thanks a lot. Have a good
Appreciate
one.
it. Thank you.